Ravnica, the city plane, needs nature. For food, for beauty, and because every single Ravnican is part of its ecosystem. The protection of this part of their world is the role of the Simic. They protect nature, heal nature, and improve upon it so that it can stay strong. On one side there is the part of the Simic that wants nature to do what it needs to do. Within the Simic there's a faction called the Utopian faction who strive to protect nature. They believe that nature is perfect as it is, as long as all green guilds help protect it. They believe in the current reality, but also in growth. They want nature to flourish. And then there's the blue part of the Simic, the adaptationists. This part of the Simic wants to nurture nature. They feel like natural evolution is too slow. It needs to be helped in order to find its true potential. Blue wants to improve upon nature. Together, the two colors focus on evolution. They focus so much, in fact, that there is no room for anything else. They often lose sight of the big picture while improving upon nature, forgetting their role in society as healers, and forgetting the ecosystem that their creations are meant to live in. And that's where the Simic start. Look at the first guild hall of the Blue and Green Guild. It seems like a beating heart, and it is, because Novigen was a mixture of living matter and hard fabric, held afloat and detached from the world by cables. These were the hard quarters of Simic experiments upon life, an isolated laboratory that has forgotten about their world, detached from their world. When you think about the Simic's role to preserve life with medicine and biomancy, healing the world with carefully cultivated and curated life forms, this is the opposite. Nature had to adapt faster and faster because the city did too. And then Novigen was the heart of a progress that would rise above all of Ravnica and that would possibly engulf it in a gooey end. Because Momir Fig himself started his experiments, leading the Simic towards one vision. Momir Fig moved his guild away from healing life, and it was now meant to improve it, because only then could it survive. Momir's vision was to look at the map formed by all life, so he started to create cytoplasts, which were green and blue globs of living slime. These were able to connect to the genes of any life form. Many people used those blobs to replace lost limbs in some of Ravnica's many wars, but Fig wanted more. He wanted to show what nature could do. He started to make more beasts, rivaling the flying knights of the Boros and the Azorius. He wanted to raise funds, but the Ravnicans were starting to become paranoid. How were the Simic able to pump out stronger and faster creatures at this rate? Ravnicans stopped adding the cytoplasts to their bodies. So, Fig enhanced the blobs, so that they just needed to touch someone to bond with them. In this way, Momir was able to steal the essences of those people, gathering their strengths and enhancing anyone else that would touch the blob with those strengths. Eventually, Momir added all the essences to his grandest experiment, Crotch, a huge ooze that stole all abilities and strength from the essences it devoured. It was always meant to grow beyond control because evolution wasn't meant to be controlled. In this way, Momir came back to the green part of the Simic, but in a warped way. Project Crash was eventually dealt with together with Momir in a big crash. But oozes remain a large part of the Simic way of life. For me, they stand for the Simic vision that every living piece of being is part of life. Even when they seem insignificant, oozes are the prime example of life growing out of control. Their Simic pride and their bane of existence at the same time. Because of course they're part of life, but often they're a crime against humanity, and we don't want the humans to perish either, so that's why the Ravnicans never lost their distrust of the Simic guild. The guild was gone for a while even, staying so small that no one would notice them, but secretly they grew. Slowly, and this time underwater, the Ravnicans didn't know Merfolk still existed on their world. And they didn't know how huge the Simic guild was becoming in their Atlantic undercity. They had focused on advancing nature through magic instead of science this time, and many of them had returned to the old Simic philosophies about spirituality and the world being a complete system. The merfolk and other Simic emerged through large holes called sinkholes or zonods. And through these gateways, the Simic had created two new schools of thought. The holdfast, the anchoring structure that kelp and sponges grow onto, anchor themselves to rocks, whose followers would love to isolate themselves from society and their ambitions. This is especially a warning against the philosophy of Momir Fig. And the upwelling on the other side, the upwards motion of water through the sinkholes. They form the expansionist movements of the Simic. It also says that nutrient-rich water should replace depleted water. Water comes up in upwelling so that the bottom of the ocean can feed the sea. Sagana had become guildmaster of the guild at this time, because she was the first to come up on shore. On land, she immediately declared the Fathom Edict. She stated, "Thank you for gathering at this ancient place under rain skies." It was raining at Azor's Plaza. Two principles guide my race. The holdfast that binds us to the sea as kelp binds to the sea floor. Another principle countervails the holdfast. Oceans live and breathe in great cycles, and the depleted waters must be replenished by richer waters from below, the upwelling. Sagana said with this that the Ravnicans were depleted and that the Simic would revitalize them. She continued, "Years ago, my people detected roots growing down into the seas, plumbing the depths through stone and steel to find water. We did not know that this was your doing. We sought knowledge of you for centuries. We did not anticipate you working together to create more wild places on Ravnica. We declare our desire to support this work. We were gladdened by new life. We knew we risked violence against us by emerging, but we calculated that Ravnicans would be grateful when they gazed on their oceans at long last. And we were correct. We have created zonods to rise up through stone and steel ourselves, and we will create more. Each will become a community. Each will have a speaker. For now, I will become the prime speaker, and I have already spoken with the Celestia, Gruul and Golgari so that we may reshape Ravnica and resurrect nature. A grand upwelling. We have sought out what is left of the Combine. We have brought to these encounters our principles and our goals. Even now, those who believe in the true Simic mission are joining us. Our home is fathoms down, and we will remain tethered to it forever. We strive for an enduring connection between Ravnica's highest heights and deepest depths, and we seek your help. We are the Simic." Sagana came through the first of 7 zonods, Zonod 1, but it was small and the Simic Guild Hall. The new one was situated in Zonod 7, a guild hall just below the surface where the Simic met other leaders and where the 7 speakers met to make choices for their own guild. Here Sagana led the utopian worldview with a focus on harmonic union between civilization and nature. They like to guide all life forms slowly through their necessary evolution. On the other side stand the adaptationists, who think the guild exists in a fragile ecosystem. The slightest effect would topple civilization. So these speakers seek Simic survival, and to make things more difficult, within these 2 streams of thought, there are the Clades. Like the whole Clade, a whole being the protection around a creature. This clan stands for protection, durability, and defense. They strengthen exoskeletons and help stabilize the zonod walls. As you can imagine, they are careful and therefore sort of utopian, but they also work with the zonods, which helps the adaptationists. And their leader definitely is an adaptationist. Forel was a Gruul shaman who gave up ground in order to save his clan. The clan turned on him because that was not the Gruul way, so he took on some adaptations to become more merfolk-like. As a Gruul member, he loved action more than anyone in the Simic guild, and so he was the proudest advocate for a new leadership. During his time as a maze runner, he could stop a draconic fire blast that could melt the heaviest metal with his own ooze magic, holding the magic for himself and showing us he is a true whole Clade leader of protection. And he's shown to force people to adapt to their environments, letting them grow skills and letting them grow in general. Forel has truly embraced adaptationist ways. The whole clade is most proud of their newest creation. Bitsy is a crisis, which is what the Simic call their experiments that result in a mixture of multiple creatures. This one is a crocodile, elk and a turtle. A mixture of very defensive creatures that was even immune to the Phyrexian glistening oil. More so because it immediately started throwing rocks at the aliens. Don't ask me how she did it. Then we have the Fin Clade, the organization responsible for quick movement through water or air, or like we see here, movement over walls. They're also responsible for transportation of messages and goods through a tubing system. The Gyre clan are very clearly utopian in nature. They focus on the cyclical patterns and seek to revitalize nature by empowering the cycles that have always been there. They know that their exponential nature is enough to make nature survive. Other than that, they focus on redirecting and nullifying magic. In other words, counterspells. And they're masters of secret meta magic, the inner workings of mana. The Izzet still think they're the only ones to know about it. And while this clade does experiment on nature, they mostly do so to learn about life, learning what's possible and finding the true self within every being, and then bringing that true self out into reality. They guide evolution more than they force it to happen. And this divide, like any true lesson, can be found in nature. The natural leviathans live underwater. They're usually too large to fit through the zonads, and therefore they're not very interesting to the adaptationists. The utopians love these huge creatures and try to protect them from adaptationist threats. The adaptationists, on the other hand, try to alter these creatures and try to turn them into crazes. Any leviathan small enough to fit through the huge zonads gets altered so that they can fly out into the city, terrorizing it. The Simic don't intend to terrorize the city, it's just an effect of the fast evolution they bring about. And that leads us to our first real story. Miko and her friends had found a decomposing monk in the sea. Our main character is their teacher. The students were tasked to solve the riddle of how long the old monk had been there. The students immediately darted around to solve the case. The teacher had only gotten 8 students this year. 2 years ago there were 22. The student groups were getting smaller because they wanted adaptationist teachers. But our teacher wanted to protect the oceans instead of experimenting with nature. A very utopian notion. Kazera was one of the students. She looks at the adapted students with interest and only tries to solve the case when her teacher came up to her. She's Sagana's niece in every way. She counts how fast plankton falls there for a moment and calculates that the monk has been there for 3 years. Perfect answer. Miko, meanwhile, hasn't solved a single riddle all year. An adaptationist teacher called Ptero then enters and everyone is amazed with his crab hands. As an adaptationist, he has a clutch of 27 students. The Guardian project had lowered the amount of protectors they'd accept from schools. Of course, all in the name of Vannevar, who wanted to encourage natural selection. And if our teacher wouldn't get any students into the protectorate, she'd lose her standing with the guild. But teachers had a plan. She'd take her few students to the open sea, something no other teacher could safely do with many students to protect. They went to look for crazes, a mixture of multiple creatures created by the Simic. On their way they passed a benthic, a natural leviathan. The crazes moved up to the students and they crossed arms together. In this way they seemed to blend in with the kelp, a technique our teacher taught her students. The crazes moves to easily eat the benthic. Teacher notes that the crazes is what they're up against in order to protect the natural creatures like the benthic. A voice from behind them stirs within a wrecked ship on the bottom of the sea. Bass, it says. The class wants to help the voice, whoever it is. Even Kazera feels empathy, an important value for the Simic protectors of life. So, teacher took 2 students with her inside the ship. She chose Miko and Kazera, who both volunteered. She chose Miko because he was courageous, and Kazera mostly because she'd never been this excited. Kazera instantly notes the wreck had been there for 80 years, longer than the Zonods were open for. So it's impossible for the Surface World boat to be there. Miko, being Miko, finds a medallion with an 8-legged starfish. A ghost appeared then, weird because humans swam with the grace of a drunken seahorse and this one seemed to float. Kazera recognizes it as a ghost. It says that it needs passage home. Kazera moves up to it and Miko warns her, both uncharacteristically motivated and wise respectively. The ghost tells them he had been lost on the bottom of a river and that the riverbed had sunk into the sea. The group promises to bring him back, and Kazera is the one to hype the others up to do it, even while getting past the Clades. They lift the ship with magic and some great ideas from Miko, of all fish. Then a shark crab Clades attacks the boat, just when they get to the Zonod. The Clades moves over. The ghost transforms at this moment. Mirko gets hit by swirling water magic of the Oars of Ghost. The teacher has to swim after Miko to save him. Chessa, another student, reveals that the ghost is bound to the boat by his treasure and that he stole most of from the Simic a long time ago as a pirate. The timid girl takes the treasure and swims off with it to the Clades. The Clades tries to bite the ghost, but it bites through it of course. The class then take the treasure up to the Zonod. Being in an air-filled room is uncomfortable, but the teacher loves all the inventions on display there that her Simic people made. Seeing the roots of the upwelling, she understood it better now. Kazera notes that she doesn't want an adaptationist mutation, just that she wants to learn from the Simic in the Zonod, so that she can help evolve the creatures like the Clades. The teacher is so proud. But at that moment, Miko touches a cytoplast from Momir Fig's time. It latches onto him for a moment, and then teacher saves him, but gets hit by the cytoplast. It then attaches to her and she grows eyes on her tentacles. Sagana enters the room and bans the class from the Zonods for breaking the cytoplast. But upon hearing that Kazera, her niece, wanted to study at the Zonod to bring the knowledge from there into the Utopian Sea, Sagana allows her to be a biomancer in the Zonods. At the showing for Protectorates, teacher's class almost gets all the spots. Ptero compliments her and she compliments him. With her tentacles, she's accidentally learned a lot from the adaptationists, and teacher says that Ptero should do the same with the Utopians. They agree to teach next year's class together. But Sagana's ways and safety would eventually crumble. Without constantly forced evolution, many Simic groups were getting tender and weak compared to the adaptationists. Once the usually utopian Zonod 4 was getting attacked by the Golgari, their troll leader would switch to the adaptationist side. Such a hostile environment forced them to become stronger, and with the help of Vannevar they did. Sagana's adaptationist rival would help Tryphon, the troll, become Zonod 4's leader. Tryphon gladly accepted his new role and now works full-time, eradicating the Golgari unlife. This helped switch Tryphon to the adaptationist side and made the council choose Vannevar over Sagana in leadership. So Sagana easily moved aside for Vannevar, speaker of Zonod 3, replacing a utopian and holdfast leader with an adaptationist leader who focused on the upwelling. She'd mutated herself to be part ooze in a very Momir Fig style, but more elegant. She believes she is the perfect manifestation of the Simic. Only bold action could create such perfection. Vannevar's card shows her ability to sacrifice life in order to create something better. Evolution, in other words. Her art reflects her ability to never eat, sleep, breathe or blink. Vannevar's philosophy is that the Simic must adapt by exceptional means in order to survive. She gives Vedalken, elves and humans modifications like wings, tentacles and crab-like claws, like you see here. Some humans even become more like beasts than humanoids. The process of creating humanoid Clades is called the Guardian Project. Vannevar wants to make the Simic into super soldiers or guardians. Of course, they have to market it like they're just guarding nature, but Vannevar has been known to get ready for a huge war by her own guild. She created holdfasts deep in the oceans. These are labs within the Zonots that focus on making these super soldiers. Roalask was the first successful result of the Guardian project. His wings, tentacles and crab claws make him a great fighter, spy, and they give him great versatility in most other disciplines. His ability reflects his purpose. He was the first tryout, so his entering the battlefield strengthens your next creations, hence the 2+1 counters. Then when he dies, the Simic will get to experiment on his body so that all of the guild can benefit from his learnings. Until that moment, Roalask will be a great warrior for the Simic. The only problem now is that most Simic even hesitate to still call Roalask human for the many adjustments that have been done to him. Perhaps because of his looks, but more probably because of his personality or the lack of it. Right now the Guardian project has been toned down just a little. Instead, the Simic have been focusing on some public relations. Zonot 5, for example, has become a tourist destination for all Ravnicans. This Zonot has been opened with a huge circling staircase, and a huge spiraling column of plant matter supports it to stay in a spiral shape. Every Ravnican can walk down them to deeper sea levels to observe the sea's beauty. The Simic hope the Zonot can inspire Ravnicans to love the sea again. The Simic have even tried to bring the sea above ground, flooding a whole district. How nice of them to reach out. The whole district of Jezuru is now at least a human's leg's length underwater, but at some places it gets house deep. The Simic provide flying fairy creatures and stone walkways kept afloat by plants so that the previous inhabitants can semi-safely traverse these lands. But Ravnica didn't stay semi-safe. During the Phyrexian invasion, the Simic were at their weakest. Many of the adaptationist thinkers of the guild instantly went to experiment with the glistening oil. This attitude to dangerous experimentation now made others destruct the guild even more. The Simic now have to connect with society a bit more, so that they might soon be trusted again. The guild offered healing treatments against the oil and helped investigate during murders of Karlov Manor, helping to identify DNA with their magic. So you can see how the Simic constantly have to swap between their two colors, and now it's time for the conservative green side to shine again. Vannifar wouldn't stop her scheming though. She didn't care about the looks of it, but if any of the Clades wouldn't produce results fast enough, she would take them in. If, for example, the Fin Clade couldn't produce a venomous flying fish, then the Guardian project would raid them and make their own. See how a Crisis doesn't have to be big, by the way? Sagana had stayed back in Zonot 1, the smallest one and the first one that she once emerged from. She led the Utopian movement, and she'd hoped that her niece Khazera would help unite the factions of the Simic. After the invasion, Sagana tried to take control of the guild again, because according to her, Vannifar's focus on adaptation had made the guild reckless, and this was kind of true. But she was killed because she'd been experimenting with Phyrexian oil in order to find a cure for it. So Vannifar stays in power, but also lost a lot of credibility. Vannifar now knows that she keeps her leadership because of other guilds. This has forced her to socialize with people. And while she doesn't like social events, her tentacles spread wide across many of her guild members and other Ravnicans, controlling them from within the spotlight. This is why her ability is to cloak guards from your hand, because she takes the spotlight so that her minions get to sneakily do what they must to further the guild's goals. During the events of murders at Karlov Manor, we have learned a bit more. For one, we learned that some of the Simic researchers now work for the Rami. Morska actively works against the guild. While she is a very curious fish, she hated to see other biomancers of her guild experiment with the glistening oil. So she abandoned the guild, and now she serves the Rami with her knowledge of the Zonots, her fish fins, and her shark senses of smell. And we have great news for Lonis, an animal expert with an obsession for cryptids, the natural leviathans that roam the seas. This snake elf or snelf looks for genetic material all around Ravnica and has been preaching about the undiscovered creatures of Ravnica. That's why the Snelf investigates for every creature entering. And while they haven't found any such creatures yet, they won't give up. And Lonus has been getting closer. As an expert, the Snelf, now with new gills, has been able to find convincing proof of the fabled Winnow Ram existing. And while we haven't seen one yet, we're left to wonder what the Simic will make of another creature that they could then mix with every other creature on Ravnica. Thanks for watching. What creature would you make if you could mix any 3 creature types? Let me know in the comments.